Hello and welcome to Uplifting Impact. So excited to be able to be here with all of you today and to be here with our special guest. So we have with us Kobena-Marcus J Collins, who is a native of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He holds a BA in secondary education and history from Lake Forest College and has also earned his master's in education in cultural foundations from UW-Milwaukee. Now, Kobena's journey to his current role as both the diversity and inclusion advisor for Kohl's corporate offices, go Kohls, we love Kohls, and also diversity recruitment consultant for Bridge Builder professional staffing has been a very natural and organic one. He has been a leader and really a servant leader in his career and has been able to demonstrate his passion for all of these topics throughout his professional career. So we are so excited to have you here and to be able to have a conversation with you. So Kobena, one of the first questions that we like to ask is, what brings you joy?
Such a great question. Thank you, first of all, for allowing me to be here with you today. I've been waiting for this day for some time. I've been watching you and your career for some time, and have always admired the work that you are doing. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you.
What brings me joy is being able to know that I can help other people reach their goals. Mm-hmm. Whether it be, as a recruiter, I get to help them find their goal of a new employment opportunity, to make the money that they want to make, or to have the impact they want to have in an organization or in the community. And just being able to see the joy that they have reaching their potential, that's what brings me joy. And I think that goes back to that, more of that servant leadership style that I have around, again, making sure that people, the barriers are not in their way, making sure that they have all the resources they need, make sure that they're exposed to, things that they wouldn't normally be exposed to. You think about Kohls, you think about clothes, but Kohls has, over 1,000 technology positions around the country. So, I want to make sure people know that. And so, oh, really? I can work there and do what I love doing? Absolutely. Come on and join the team. So just being able to see people, reach their goals and be successful is what brings me joy. Beyond my wife and my daughter. Without saying.
Absolutely. You know what? It's like the same for me. I love watching people thrive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When you see somebody really get into a space where they can just be their full self and do the thing. And, there's something there's nothing better, I feel like, than that moment.
I'm going to date myself. It's like The Last Dragon and Bruce Leroy when he says, I'm the master, and he gets the glow himself. It's just amazing to see people catch their glow in whatever field that they're doing.
I love that. Catch their glow. And that's what you do, right? In a recruiting role, those are the moments where you get to help somebody make the connection between the things that they're really passionate about and what they love to do and what they enjoy doing and what they've spent their lives trying to get better at doing, to some place that really shows their values, right? Where they can show up and to do that work completely. So help me understand a little bit, right? Education into diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm always curious, like, what was the pathway and how did that translate, that work in education? How does it translate in what you do in the DEI space?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you talk about exposure to different opportunities, growing up in Milwaukee, we didn't have a whole lot, first generation college student, and I didn't have exposure to different career fields. So, it's, that typical, inner city, very isolated, doctor, teacher, lawyer, there's engineer, just some of those real more mainstream career fields. So I went to college to be a veterinarian because I loved animals, and I didn't really know what else there was that you could do as a career when you loved animals.
Yeah.
I ended up not being very good in that space, and I had a teacher in high school that kind of had been throwing out these little jabs like, you ever thought about being a teacher? You should be a teacher. You ever thought about being a teacher? And I always said no. It was never even something to consider. But then I took an anthropology class, sociology anthropology class in college, and I realized that I really got to learn more about cultures, which for me, culture is what I clung on to because I'm mixed, black and white, grew up in a time when we weren't very popular. I wasn't black enough to be black. I obviously wasn't white. So I just grabbed onto cultural elements of different communities. And so once I got to college and realized I could study cultures, I said, well, maybe I can teach history from a cultural perspective. And so that's why I got my degree in secondary education and history, because I wanted to teach, a cultural representation of history. And so culture was always about it. I traveled around the world with 700 college students and went to 10 countries in one semester.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely. It was called Semester. Awesome. Highly recommend it to any college student who's listening to this. Go look at Semester at Sea. And that just really expanded my mind around culture and what it really meant to understand other cultures and how to interact and be around other cultures, because the college students were from all across the U.S. So that was like the time when I really realized that, back then we called it multiculturalism. Mm-hmm. And so it's evolved into diversity and inclusion, but that's where I felt myself at home. That's where I felt like I belonged, was where there was not homogeneity, because I didn't feel like I had one identity myself. Yeah. And so I think over time that just kind of, from a recruitment standpoint, I was, always really good with connecting with people as a result. And eventually I started moving into the diversity recruitment space, and then into the overall, D&I space, because what's the good of getting a bunch of highly talented, diverse individuals if they go into an organization that doesn't welcome and value them as individuals, where people can't be their true self, which I'll say that's probably the number one goal of our D&I work at Kohls, is to make sure that people can bring their truest authentic self to work every day and not feel like they have to mask themselves outside of the COVID mask.
that one is different. Yeah, I get it. And you know what? I think that's so beautiful, because being a biracial person myself, just kind of understanding like how in many ways that has shaped my desire to want to learn more, not just about myself, but also about others. That there's something kind of fundamental about who I am that I think comes from the fact that I was trying to make sense of it. And also it created like curiosity about others. Like, well, what is your background and what's your culture? Right. There's like,
yeah. Exactly.
There. Yeah, for sure. That's really interesting. So I guess one of the things that I'm also interested in is just thinking about this world of recruitment. One of the big questions that we always get is, how do we make sure that we are putting ourselves in a position where we are really bringing in people from different backgrounds, or who have some of this multicultural, candidates? What does it look like to you? And what are some of the common themes that you have seen to be really successful in recruiting people who come from all over the world and helping them find their place in a big institution?
Yeah. So what's interesting is I look at it as the what I call the 4 R's, maybe 5 R's. So,
everybody get your pen, write it down.
You ready? So you've got recruitment, retention, reputation, and representation. And then that 5th pseudo R is resources. So a lot of companies have, a focus on recruitment, and then they realize that they have to do something about retention. A lot of that has to do with, the representation that they see within the organization. And then it's the reputation that they have in the community. Are they giving back? Are they engaged? Or are they, in some cases, are they just soaking up the resources? Are they just getting people to, buy their goods and services, but not putting anything back into the community? So a lot of times, and what research has said that I've seen, is people want to work for an organization that that they can have impact on, and 2, that has a positive environment. And so when we think about retention, like you said, can a mixed kid like us go into a Kohl's and just be us, and not have to worry about wearing, the veil or the worrying about our double consciousness, as Du Bois would talk about in over 100 years ago. That is still many times is the case today.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that I think is important when it comes to recruitment and diversity recruitment is, from that representation standpoint, like, there is a reality that Black professionals would like to see a Black recruiter, and Latino or Latinx professionals would like to see a Latinx recruiter. If that's the face of the organization and the face never looks like you, then we're going to make an assumption that I'm going to be the only one when I go there. Mm-hmm. And so I think a lot of companies don't think about that part. And the last thing is really the culture once they get there. Right? So do they have resources? Do they have business resource groups? We just had a conversation with our interns from a BRG standpoint, and it was an amazing conversation. I think that's so critical to engaging people, because it's like one of the statements that came up was, my BRG is my HBCU. Yes. So, I did my graduate work on a 2-year study on why students choose HBCUs. And, that research says that they feel like they can be themselves. They have less stressors. They have more people encouraging them than they do in other institutions. And so when you have a BRG at an organization that you personally can identify with, you're able to kind of find a space where you don't have to have that extra anxiety. And that really pulls away from your work productivity, right? And so you can bring all of the experience from a professional standpoint, all of your intellectual capacity to the work itself. Yep. I think that's so important to have those spaces, even if it's not called a BRG, if it's a ARG or a council or an affinity group, just having that space for people. What I think is equally important in our current situation is the power of allyship. Mm-hmm. And making sure that our organization, that ground is fertile. So you can sow all the seeds, you can plant all the seeds you want, but if the ground isn't fertile, you won't get anything, no matter how much water or sun you give it. If the ground isn't fertile, it's not going to grow. So allyship is the key to having fertile soil for diverse individuals to thrive in an organization.
I agree. I mean, that's why we do the How to Be an Ally Summit, right? Because we know that, like, in order for organizations to thrive and for these ideas and these practices and these principles and all this work and energy and conversations and all that, for all of it to thrive, you have to have really fertile ground. You have to have people who will stand in the space and help sow those seeds, right? And make sure that there's fertile ground, and make sure that people are watering it, and kind of we need everybody to be part of it. This is not just a small team that sits over here and they do that DEI work. No, this is what we all do.
It cannot be siloed. It must be fully integrated into an organization.
Absolutely. And I think, this is a little sidebar, but I'm going to share it. And I don't really tell a lot of people this, but now I'm going to tell everybody on the podcast. But I have a really strong affection for Kohls, because as a child, I was invited to participate and be one of Kohl's models. So I would get to be in the magazines and, do things and get to wear the clothes and do all the things. I remember one time I was doing a back to school special and I was jump roping, and I feel like I was probably out there for 10 minutes, but in my mind, the way I remember it, I was out there for 5 hours, just jump roping. I'm sure that wasn't the case.
I think I might remember that ad. Because I always, anytime I looked at an ad, I always looked for the brown kids, But I looked for somebody who looked like me in the ads.
And I think that was so powerful. One, it was powerful and experience to be around, adults and kind of have this professional experience. Two, it really helped me to be the first in my family to go to college, right? Because that was how I supported myself and, and how my parents kind of paved that pathway for me. But the other reason why it was so important is because they had enough foresight, right? As an organization that, like you said, it wasn't popular to have mixed race kids. And there was a lot of pieces that were like, you are too light, you're too dark, you're too whatever, your hair's too curly.
Well,
to
think
be
about it.
able to,
It wasn't until the 70s or to the late 60s that it was even legal.
right. So here we are right in this situation. And I remember how important it was for me to do that and have that experience. But what was most important about it was being able to feel like, no, somebody saw me, right? And saw that I had value and also respected that there was other children. So
Mm-hmm.
Kohl's being in this space, at least from my perspective and kind of my interaction, this is not like a new thing. This has been something that has been an ongoing thing. And it's the way that I think that's why I think so fondly, for many reasons, all the wonderful people I've gotten to meet and work with, but also because I have that experience. And I had that as a child. But yeah, I get to show up, right? The way I look, and even though it's different, and all the way I look like matters too. And that was one of some of my earliest experiences in the professional world was with Kohl. So there you go. I told you a little secret.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is
now
an amazing story.
Now the team's going to want to share a picture. I know exactly what that question's going to be.
We're going to have to go to the archives.
Go to real archives here. But I'm so glad that you were able to just share some of that with us. I think one of the other questions I have is really thinking about, you have people and teams who are trying to figure out like, what is the right blend of staff, right? We don't want to just bring people in and check boxes and do all that because we know that's problematic. And we do want to have, some diversity in our thoughts and we want to create that inclusion. Share the analogy you shared with me before. Everybody needs to hear this.
Yeah, sure. So, a lot of people will talk about diversity and inclusion where diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is, being asked to dance. And I have a little bit different variation on that. Is diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to be a part of the planning committee, and belongingness is being able to let your body move however the music makes you move and feeling comfortable doing it.
I love that. And I know so many people are going to start using it. I'm going to start using it too. But one of the things that I think people are wondering about is like, how do you create that space as somebody who's responsible for HR? How do you create that space where you can have a blend of different people coming from different backgrounds and everyone feels respected and valued? What are your tips there?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to have a good balance of internal and external talent. So a lot of times organizations, and it makes sense from a logistical and historical standpoint, your interns are going to be, when you think about recruitment, if you just recruit your interns, you save like 500% of your salary wages to recruit other people if you could just convert your interns, which makes sense. And then from there, you've already invested a year or two. You want to continue to get them to be promoted throughout the organization. It's also another benefit to be able to say, hey, we promote from within, which means there's opportunity, which is all well and good. But there's a little bit of a double-edged sword in that you could fall into groupthink. And you get a situation where maybe you do bring in an external talent and they come with new ideas. And because most of your team is internal, the response is, well, that's not how we do it here. Or just wait and get to know us the way we do things first here before you share your ideas. Well, those are missed opportunities. So my tip is to be conscious around the percentage of internal versus external. Sure, continue to be majority internal because there are so many benefits to that. But anywhere between a third and half of your positions, I'd recommend filling those with externals, so that becomes a part of the culture of having different ideas are going to come on a regular basis.
Yeah,
and that's going to force us to have positive conflict. And in order to do that, we have to have a safe mental space as well. So having an organizational culture where that you have that safe mental space and you're bringing in talent from multiple different lenses to help make sure that you don't get caught up in your blinders and caught up in, there's those pictures there's a picture that's a frog and a horse, depending on how you look at it, right? But if your team is all horses, you're going to miss all the frog opportunities and you're going to miss all the frog pitfalls.
Right.
So you want to intentionally find frog people and horse people.
I mean, what other note could we end on? How many frogs and horses do you have? Right? Like, I like this
That's
idea
my
that
homage to my original major as a pre-vet major.
I see that veterinarianism is still in you. We're feeling it.
Yeah,
But I would have preferred, if you use the elephant since that's our company.
true.
I'm just kidding.
I work on that imagery.
I'm just kidding. But no, really, I do appreciate that because I haven't heard people talk about that distinction and even thinking about the internal and external and what your percentages are. So I think that's a really good question to ponder. And it might even be data that you could look at, right? Like how do we do that? And what are our current percentages and why? And really like kind of drilling into that a little bit more to understand how our organization and where some of those places might be. That's a really, really good data point for people if you don't have it already to actually go back and try and get that data point and monitor it, right? Watch how it's growing. So I feel like this has just been a lovely conversation. It's been so nice to be able to connect with you. So many gems in this conversation, and including the frog and horse gem, but also thinking about this idea of fertile ground and what that looks like. So thank you so much for being with us. Kobena, if there's other people who are looking to like connect with you, see what you're recruiting for, because now they're excited about working with Kohls, or just to kind of follow you, what's the pathway for them to do that?
Yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn. That's the best way by and large to catch me. You can always catch me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. So we'll make sure that we put your LinkedIn link into our show notes, but just want to say thank you so much for being here with us. I think it's so important to be able to have these kinds of conversations. We here at Uplifting Impact feel very strongly that if we are having these kinds of conversations, we're pushing ourselves to really think about these ideas of what it looks like to pull our teams together. I mean, recruitment is huge right now, right? Everybody is struggling. Everybody is struggling with recruitment. And how do we do that in a way that is intentional, that really has this inclusion as part of our intentional strategy? So thank you so much for all of you joining us here today. We ask that you go ahead and share the podcast information with a friend, with a colleague, with somebody in your family, somebody in your community, because we know that the more people who are thinking in these ways, who are really pressing their thoughts, the more impact we can uplift. So thank you, and we'll see you on the next show.